Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is October 9th, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can send your questions and comments to Helga via email to questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them on the chat page. Helga, there seems to be a debate underway among the establishment network, which runs what the Russians are calling collective Biden, over what to do about Ukraine. The Financial Times reported on a, quote, shifting mood in Washington and European capitals, where they're acknowledging, or some are starting to acknowledge, that Ukraine cannot win. Zelensky just announced he's canceling the November fake peace conference. And then last night it was announced by the White House that Biden's trip to Germany, where he was scheduled to preside over the Ramstein Ukraine Contact Defense Group in a meeting, that's been canceled, allegedly to deal with the damage expected from Hurricane Milton. There's skepticism about this because he didn't seem so involved in the damage from Hurricane Helene. But given these developments, we have our first question. What, in your opinion, is the significance of his change in plans? And is it possible that there is a split developing within the Biden administration and within NATO over plans to keep backing the fight against Russia to the last Ukrainian? And if so, doesn't this show that some have concluded that Vladimir Putin is not bluffing?
Well, I think it's probably even much bigger than that, because while the Western media are still trying to keep the people in the dark, I think in the corridors of power, there is a realization that we are sitting on two regional crises which could go to a global escalation. That is, one is the Ukraine and the other one is the Middle East. And I think one has to look at these two things together because, let's go one after the other. But concerning the Ukraine, the Ramstein meeting, which was supposed to be addressed or shared by Biden, is postponed, not clear until when. But Stoltenberg, the former just retired NATO Secretary General, is now proposing what amounts to what they call the German proposal, which would be the idea, that there will be some agreement with Russia, whereby, the offer would be that NATO, that Ukraine would join NATO, but only the western part, while the eastern part would be treated like the GDR in 1956 when West Germany joined NATO. Now that is completely out of the question. Russia will never accept that. But it reflects the fact that, the latest reports are that the Russian advances on the battlefield are so significant, and the situation of the Ukrainian army, they just don't have the soldiers. There is reports about a general demoralization. A lot of people are deserting. So it's generally just a question of time when this will absolutely end, because there is just no more fighting capability. Now, at that point, we are at the point, and we are actually at that point, what former General Inspector of the German Army Kujat had warned about already August 1 year ago, that NATO will come to the decision of either having a negotiated solution, one which will be accepted by Russia, which this present one is not, or go for an escalation. And that is the immediate question ahead. And there is, very clearly, a battle about that in where it looks that the military in the United States, who know what the implications are more on the side of, ending this, or, going for a diplomatic solution, while the more political part is basically saying, no, let's enable the Ukrainians to use long-range missiles deep into the territory of Russia. Even that has been clearly defined as the ultimate red line. That's why Putin has changed the nuclear doctrine of Russia. So I'm afraid we are sitting, in respect to the Ukraine, in the immediate vicinity of a decision of escalation, which could lead to in the worst case, a global nuclear war, and or to finally come to a peace resolution, which unfortunately the latter one is not so much upfront. Now, if you combine that with the situation in the Middle East, let me just give you some of the elements. I can only advise you, watch a video which was put out yesterday by a platform called Dialogue Works. And there the host had Colonel Wilkerson on, the former chief of staff of Colin Powell, when he was Secretary of State of the United States during the time of the Iraq War. And what Colonel Wilkerson there presents, I can only advise you, listen to that. It may not all be 100% verified, but for those of you who normally never get any real coverage about events, it is an eye-opener. He starts with a short presentation of a video which apparently was made in Turkey, which is that alone is absolutely a must to see. It has a scenario where in the year 2040, the 16th anniversary of the genocide in Gaza is documented around cities in the world, in Seoul, in Berlin, in Paris, elsewhere, are exhibitions of the horrors which happened in Gaza this year. And a lot of children are asking their grandparents, where were you when this happened? It's a very moving, and the pictures indeed are quite adequate. So please watch this video. And then Colonel Wilkerson basically goes into the possible scenarios, and he reports that there is a massive debate in the United States right now between those who say that the United States should come in on the side of Israel, where Israel is about to retaliate against Iran. And, basically, this is not now in the video, but I'm saying it, there is a debate. Should Israel hit only, in quote, the oil refineries of Iran, or, go to attack the nuclear facilities, which Donald Trump had suggested in an unbelievable statement? I mean, it is very clear that these nuclear facilities of Iran are in the mountains, and they're hidden deep in the mountains. And the only way you could destroy them is with nuclear weapons. I don't know if Trump knows that, or if he's just lightheartedly saying this, but it is unbelievable. So what Colonel Wilkerson says is that there is a debate between those who say, if let Israel do it alone, or should the United States be on the side of Israel doing it? In any case, we are looking at the abyss. If this happens, we are entering the danger of a general war in the Middle East, which would involve every force, because if you start to attack Iran in such a massive way, naturally, the whole place would go up in flames, and all the Arab states. The Arab states have just formed a new alliance where they say that they want to stay neutral and not get involved in any conflict on the side of the United States if there is an attack on Iran. That is a completely new element in the situation, because the distance between Israel and Iran is very, very far, and it requires refueling both by strikes into Iran as well as for airplanes flying out, and that cannot be done without US assistance. So if you look at these two situations, and I really think one has to look at them together, the absolute point of no return in respect to Ukraine, and then secondly, the absolute powder keg of the situation in Southwest Asia. I think what we have been saying the whole time, that we need a stop to this. We need a complete change. People have to speak out that we are on the verge of World War III, and that we absolutely have to go in a different direction by, going in the direction of a new security and development architecture, which stops geopolitics and puts the idea of cooperation in its place. So I think that, that is really what we are looking at.
Now, we have a couple of questions on both the Ukraine situation and the Middle East. From a peace activist in the United Kingdom, he writes, Starmer and his government moved quickly after his election victory to escalate the conflict between NATO and Russia. But with polls showing a major drop in support for him, what do you think the clever bastards in the City of London have as a fallback plan?
Well, I don't know if they have a fallback plan. The British are known that they always bet on all sides simultaneously. But I think right now, the idea of keep pushing this escalation, I can only say the best thing which could happen is that the international community, rather than following the media lines and lies which are being told, should start an investigation of why is the Ukraine war still going on? Why was the peace option which existed in March 22, the so-called Istanbul solution, which both sides, Ukraine and Russia, had agreed upon, was sabotaged through the trip by Boris Johnson, and that all the many people who died since, more than 500,000 people on the Ukrainian side, and probably a lot of people on the Russian side as well, that all goes to the account of Boris Johnson and the British. And that should be investigated, and then maybe one could shift world opinion.
Helga, here we have a question on the situation in Germany. Someone wrote in, I watched the Schiller Institute event on the threat to Germany if it accepts the U.S. offer of nuclear long-range missiles which can hit Russia, and was very impressed by the video. Do you know if this was seen in Germany? Is there opposition among Germans to the Schulz government accepting the missiles?
I think it is growing. It's not yet enough. That's why we made this special program with former Ambassador Jack Matlock and nuclear expert Ted Postol, and other experts, Rainer Rupp, Wolfgang Effenberger, Alain Corvès. And we are right now trying to circulate these videos, especially the one from Matlock and Postol, because there are outstanding American experts. One, a senior diplomat who was a time witness of the time of the end of the Cold War and the German unification, and Postol, because he is, the probably one, if not the world expert on nuclear weapons. And he made a very, very dramatic point that Germany will cease to exist if the war if it ever comes to an actual war. And I can only ask you, our viewers, we have put out these two videos as separate videos, because most people will not have the time to watch the length of the entire program. Help us to get these two videos out in the maximum way. We put the link underneath this program, so send it out to everybody, because the only way how I can hope that we can stop this danger is if every citizen on the planet would be aware of what are the consequences of a nuclear war, and then basically take to the streets and other actions to tell the governments that they have to get away from this course of confrontation. So I think that there are other people mobilizing. There was at the Berlin rally on the 3rd of October, there was a demonstration in Berlin, which was significant, not large enough, but significant. And there several people issued a new Berlin appeal, basically demanding that these medium-range missiles absolutely must not be installed in Germany. So there are people moving, but I think it's very far away from the degree of urgency which I think exists now. And the long medium range missiles is just a derivative of what we are facing right now. So I can only say, help us to distribute these two videos as far as you can.
You're listening to Helga Zepp LaRouche, the founder of the Schiller Institute, and we have some time for more questions. You can send them to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org. Here's a question from a student in California, Helga. She writes, Biden, Harris, and Blinken keep saying they are working hard to prevent a full-scale war from breaking out in the Middle East. But it appears that Netanyahu is either ignoring them or they're saying one thing in public, that is no full-scale war, while they're supporting his plans to crush Hamas and Hezbollah and go after Iran in private. Could the U.S. stop Israeli aggression, or does Israel control U.S. politics?
Well, I think, it's now very far developed, and it's not so clear if we are looking at the breakaway ally scenario where certain forces in the United States pretend to be in opposition to Israel, and then Israel does what it wants anyhow. That's one option. It could also be, for example, Netanyahu just called back Gallant, his defense minister, who was supposed to go to the United States to discuss all of this. Now he is, basically he just made a unbelievably untruthful video. So, I think there is this debate I just mentioned before. Should the United States go with Israel in retaliation against Iran? And then what will be the scope of this retaliation, which, I would assume the United States is trying to if they would decide to go with Israel. As I said, Israel cannot really do it without the United States because of logistic and, various satellite information and other logistical support. So I think the United States, the only thing which would stop this is if the United States would emphatically say, no more weapons, no more money, and, if need be, even, tell Israel we have the means to tell you not to. I don't think the sentiment is like that, especially not in the election campaign, but the United States is clearly the one country which could do it. But I think if enough people realize that we are on the verge of seeing a firestorm which could bring down the entire Southwest Asia, people have to demand it. That is the key point.
Okay, we have a question from, actually there's a follow-up to that one from Jim Hogue, who's a long-term contact, who raises the question of how can we reasonably discuss the situation in Israel until we learn what really happened on October 7th. Was it a plan of Netanyahu? Was it an error, a security lapse? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, that is in a certain sense a question for historians, because we are right now in the middle of an escalation. And, obviously, in respect to what Israel is doing in Gaza, the line is, it is just a reaction to October 7th. I mean, all the people in the region, the Arabs, the various so-called neutral countries, they all know that, what we are seeing playing out right now is a tragedy, which was really starting with the Balfour Declaration and the entire history of the conflict ever since. In Germany, you are not allowed to even discuss that. So I will limit my remarks to, people should try to get an all-encompassing picture. But I think that the only thing to do right now is to to stop the fighting, to bring, even I think it was the Danish Prime Minister who made the proposal that the international community should enforce the two-state solution, meaning enforcing it, meaning, obviously blue helmet of the UN or some variety thereof. But I think, the question is really that the international community cannot stop, cannot just watch this, because it will blow up. So I think, the only country which could really stop it without a major war is the United States. And that means all the responsibility is on this present administration and whatever other administration is coming in.
Okay, here's a question on the situation in Europe. Western policies often backfire, like the sanctions policy against Russia, which hurt Europe more than Russia. The European Union is now moving for a trade war against China. Who would be hurt more by a trade war, the EU or China?
Well, I think both of them would suffer, and it's a completely idiotic policy. Fortunately, many industrialists start to speak out. In Italy, the steel sector. In Germany, the auto sector, they are finally speaking out that, such sanctions would be absolutely, shooting in your own knee. But I think the larger picture is, it cannot be separated. It's not just the sanctions, because the tariffs and this is just a part of either in the West, they are trying to go for global NATO, declare Russia, China, and by that token, the entire global South, the enemy, and try to decouple from China, or as they call it euphemistically in the European Union, to de-risk, which is ridiculous. It's the same like decoupling. And that, if it would be carried through, would lead to the separation of the entire world economy into two completely separate blocks. A NATO, global NATO bloc, which will be, an effort to contain Russia, China, and the global majority, which is impossible. Or we get the countries of the Western collective West to cooperate. And I think that is the urgent demand of the day. People have to become active, because we are sitting on the verge of an explosion of the international situation, which once it goes one step further, I'm very afraid cannot be brought back under control. So I think the people who have some influence and some amount of power have to start now to act, and the people who think that they are just ordinary people, I think the only thing left for them is to take to the streets and, basically make clear that they are not supporting this, and that the governments have no right to do what they're doing right now if they are on this confrontation line. It's not just the tariffs, it's part of this much larger geopolitical confrontation which has to stop.
Now, here's a question about the upcoming BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, from a podcaster in the Cameroons. She writes, I'm excited about the prospect of more African countries, such as Algeria or Nigeria, becoming members of the BRICS. But I'm curious about something you have said, Mrs. LaRouche, that it would not be difficult for the U.S. to work with the BRICS. I see no evidence that there is any interest among leading figures in the U.S. to cooperate with and support a multipolar system. Why do you say it would be easy?
Because China has made many times the offer and said that the BRICS and before the Belt and Road Initiative are open for cooperation for every country. When Obama met several years ago with President Xi, when Obama was still president, President Xi explicitly offered to the United States to cooperate. So that's why I'm saying it would be very easy. And I think even if the situation with Russia right now is at an absolute historic low point, that is just the realization of the side of the Russians that there is no interest on the side of the US or other people in the West to even talk. This is why the Russian ambassador in Washington, Antonov, just left. This is incredible. He left his post and there is no replacement. So obviously reflecting the fact that Antonov, and he had said it before repeatedly, that nobody wanted to talk to him. Here you have a Russian ambassador in Washington, and he has to articulate his frustration over the fact that he has nobody to talk to. I mean, what happened to diplomacy? So, that is why, the answer has to come from other forces, like governors, state legislators, mayors. I mean, the American people are not on the same course necessarily, like this confrontation to declare everybody an enemy. And, the United States right now is faced with some very, very serious problems. I mean, the present crisis in some of the states along the East Coast, North Carolina, Florida, already the Hurricane Helene probably caused 1,000 people to die. I mean, that's not yet the official figure, but there are estimates that under the rubble, there are probably, that amount of that number of people who have died, and hundreds of thousands of people have lost their homes. And what is now the reaction of the government? They offer $750 to people who have lost everything. This is, and it causes huge rage among people. There is no budget anymore for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And now the new hurricane is scheduled to hit the land today. This is possibly becoming the worst hurricane in 100 years. And what it reflects so much is not global warming or any of the stories which are being put out, but the fact that the United States has disinvested in infrastructure for a very long time, and that there has been no catastrophe, no preparation for potential natural catastrophes like we have seen it in Germany and in many other places. So what this reflects is a collapse of the infrastructure as part of the collapse of the physical economy of the United States. And, that is just one side, the collapse of the physical economy. And then you have on the other side, the pending blowout of the financial system, which, could happen any time, triggered by any even stupid incident. So there is a good enough reason why the United States, why Germany, which is in a free fall in respect to its economy, why they should change policy and go back to a perspective of cooperation, technological innovation, investment, and just bring the world in order. It's just the financial powers who are so concerned about the maintenance of their bankrupt financial system, who are at the same time the profiteers of these wars, including, the present wars. So I think we have an incredible existential civilizational crisis, which should catch the attention of really every citizen on the planet.
Now, here's a question. You just mentioned the hurricane that's about to hit Florida. Someone writes in, Tampa is the home of the CENTCOM logistics hub for all Pacific and Middle East operations, and asking if this would affect, if Hurricane Milton would affect the policy toward whether it would support, would it have an impact rather on Netanyahu's plans?
Well, we already see that the meeting in Ramstein, in the Ramstein task force, has been postponed because President Biden says he has to stay in the United States to attend, the unfolding catastrophe. Well, I'm now making it only half serious, but half earnest. Maybe St. Peter had, some passion for what is happening on Earth, and he sent these hurricanes to tell people that they should get reasonable, like the pharaohs had to be hit with the plagues. Now, I'm only meaning that half serious, but there is maybe some point of truth in it, insofar as, you cannot violate the laws of the physical universe for a long period of time without that the universe hits back. This is called natural law. This is called, that there is a higher lawfulness in the, in creation, if you want, in the physical universe, which is, if you don't invest in the things which protect people, then that is the result. So in a certain sense, if you want, you can take it as a warning from above.
Well, for those of you who are geographically challenged, St. Petersburg is a city very close to Tampa that's also expected to be hit very hard by the storm surges. All right, Helga, I have a question for you from a contrarian historian on my network who's an author, and he says he disagrees with you that the U.S. was anti-colonial. He said it was never anti-colonial. It's been in colonial wars since its founding. And he said, for example, the Monroe Doctrine is an imperial claim to U.S. sovereignty over South and Central America. And he's basically referring to what the New York Times did with its 1619 project. How would you respond to him?
Well, I think that is factually not true, because, first of all, look at John Quincy Adams. He was very, very emphatic that it was not the purpose of the United States to have wars abroad and chase foreign monsters. And he was advocating a foreign policy where the United States would be one republic among others, trying to have an alliance of sovereign states. The War of Independence was against what? It was against the attempt by the British Empire to keep its colony. And, when the War of Independence broke out, it was emphatically an anti-colonial war, which drove George III crazy. The British at that time, they lost their marbles and have not regained much of it since, over the loss of their largest and most cherished colony. And in the same way, the Monroe Doctrine was not what people make out of it today. But, what was the Monroe Doctrine against? It was against the arms of the octopus reaching into Latin America. Of who? Who were the countries of Europe at that time? It was all empires. It was not nation states. It was empires. The Metternich, after the Congress of Vienna, the British, the French, everybody was an empire. So I think that is really a distortion of history, which should not stand, because, I think this idea of the United States having always been evil, it's very popular, but it does not do justice, because the United States was a project by the Europeans to create a republic. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it's a document which, is valid. That's why I made it the founding document of the Schiller Institute. I just changed a few words to make it applicable for the whole world. These rights are inalienable. And if you just change, I think I changed altogether 6 words where it says colony, I say developing countries, to make it applicable. And I think that idea of sovereignty, of the devotion to the common good, which is in the American Constitution, and especially in the preface of the Constitution, that was the most advanced constitution at that time, and it represents a complete watershed. The British tried to undo that, in the War of 1812 by allying with the Confederacy in the Civil War. And then, when they realized that they couldn't reconquer the American colony by military means, they started to subvert it by convincing the American establishment to adopt the model of the British Empire as the joint basis for an unipolar world. And that's what we are looking at until today. So I think if you look at the history of the United States, it was the fight between being a republic or being an empire. And unfortunately, the present leadership or establishment seems to think that they are better off to be an empire, but that is not the true identity of the United States.
Okay, final question. We return to the matter of the BRICS summit coming up. And the question is, how significant is it that Turkey wishes to join the BRICS?
Well, I think it's very significant because it shows you the trend of the time. I mean, the European Union has given Turkey the cold shoulder since many years, and the frustration in Turkey over that fact has been growing. And now with the BRICS, there is the true alternative, the Belt and Road Initiative projects, of the new Silk Road, which Turkey, has been historically in a key geographical position to be the hub between Asia, Africa, and Europe. And I think Turkey is being part of NATO. So far, they have said they want to be both be part of the BRICS and part of NATO. But that creates a very interesting question, because with the present outlook of NATO, that's practically impossible. So that means either they will kick Turkey out, or maybe, they accept the Turkish model to transform NATO into the idea of cooperating with the BRICS. In any case, it creates a huge pressure point on everybody in the right way.
Well, this Friday, you'll have another Zoom call of the International Peace Coalition. This has become a major center of discussion and dialogue in the absence of government institutions taking these up. What's the plan for this Friday?
Well, I think we will very, very earnestly try to have spokesmen and speakers on the two crises which I mentioned before. I think that the need to get people really on the seriousness of the situation. We need all forces who are possibly there. So join this meeting, because I don't have the full list of speakers yet, but I'm absolutely certain that people will use that platform to sound the alarm, which is more urgent than ever before.
Well, Helga, you've been sounding the alarm and people are listening. So I look forward to seeing you on Friday.
Yes. See you, I hope, on Friday.